And we're live. Hello, everybody. If you can tell, the lovely Mama D is not here, but Mary Jane is wonderful enough to take her place tonight. She has got to study for a test for her new job that she's getting, and she's been doing a lot of studying, and she has to do a little test tomorrow, so she wants to be prepared, and I'm all for that. And we love you, Mama D, very much. But thank you so much for sitting in, Mary Jane.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I love you guys. This is fun.
I love you. I love you. You're part of the family, so you know. And tonight we're going to be talking with Mark Ireland. He is actually, and I was just explaining what happened. I'd had a different guest in for this time, and I had to reschedule and put him in January. And then I forgot, I put him in January schedule, but I forgot to take him out of this week's schedule. So when I talked to the agent, to Gail, she said, I have got a guy who'd be perfect. And here he is Mark. So let me play his bio video. Let me get him on here. You guys can see a little bit more about him and what he's all about. And he's awesome. This week in the Fox Den with Gina B and Mama D, we welcome Mark Ireland. Mark is the co-founder of Iclping Parents Ical, an organization with more than 24,000 members that assists bereaved parents worldwide. He has participated in mediumship research studies conducted by the University of Arizona and the University of Virginia, and he currently operates a medium certification program. Mark is the author of Soul Shift. After the passing of his youngest son, Mark sought out evidence for the continuity of consciousness after physical death. On his journey, Mark was able to connect with his son's essence, and he observed a variety of phenomena supporting the survival hypothesis. Interweaving profound personal experience and scientific evidence, Ireland presents a deep dive into psychic medium phenomena, spirit visitations, afterlife communication, reincarnation, and near-death experiences, pointing to the post-mortem survival of the consciousness. We welcome you, Mark, and everyone to the Fox Den. Can you dig the music?
That was a nice piece. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Welcome to the Fox Den, Mark. Really great to have you. Hi, Carmen. Hi, Colette. Everybody else, hello. Welcome. Please share the show. We love you. So that kind of... it told a lot about you in a little thing, but in that it's really kind of packed with a lot of things that you've done. So you grew up with a psychic father, right? A medium father. So this was already kind of in your blood. We're going to ask you all about that. I want to know all about how that was. You know, that must have been an awful childhood. You can't get away with anything. And so besides that, like, were there others in the family, and were you showing signs of it too? So that's an awful lot to ask right away.
Yeah, going back to my childhood, you know, I grew up with a psychic father. Initially, he had his own interdenominational church, as he called it. He was initially introduced to he was just naturally born psychic. He was born cross-eyed. Oh. And at the age of 5, his parents took him to the Columbus, Ohio Children's Hospital for corrective surgery on his eyes. Oh, really? And after the surgery had been completed, he was in a bed, kind of bound actually, with his eyes cupped and bandaged, and I'm sorry for him. And she said she'd let him out if he promised not to touch the bandages on his eyes. And he said that he wouldn't. So she let him up, and she went on her rounds, came back only to find him bouncing a ball against the wall and catching it, thinking, oh my God, he's taken the bandages off, but he hadn't, which was even more disturbing to her.
Yeah.
So then she pulled in some doctors to, test him to the best of their ability. And they put him in his bed and had made like one doctor stand at the foot of the bed and another in the doorway. And the one in the doorway would say, who's standing in front of you now? And he got it right every time. So that's kind of was the breakout event that they knew there's something unique about this kid. So that's what I grew up with as a father, who by the time I was born was doing blindfold billet psychic demonstrations in public, both in his own church And, and then later in the secular world, going into like Rotary clubs or, TV shows, even nightclubs and things like that. And he would take 10 strips of Johnson & Johnson medical tape, which is extremely thick and sticky if you've ever felt the roll of it, cover his eyes with that, and then 3 opaque blindfolds, and then more tape over that, and then tape down below the blindfold to make sure no one thought he could see out here. It was ridiculous that anyone would actually think he could see, but nonetheless,
absolutely no one.
It was part of the deal. And so he would say, be at a lectern, and people would write questions, and say an average demonstration might have 100 people. So people would send up questions, and he would answer not only those questions, but go off and give them more information than they asked for, including first and last names, occupations, marital situations, all kinds of crazy things. So when you grow up with that and you see how real it is, and he would have, out of 100 people, he probably addressed 50 to 60. So, there's no way you could have 50 or 60 plants out of a crowd of 100. It wouldn't make any sense, financially or otherwise. But, and then intermingled in that too would be occasionally some mediumship popping through. And also in his church, it was really more focused on the spirit messages. And so having grown up with that, I knew that it was real, and I knew there was more than what we can see in terms of just the physical existence. And that gave me a lot of confidence going through life, even though I didn't really follow in my father's footsteps.
Well, everyone, I mean, you even write about it. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to read the entire book, but I did skim. You do mention a lot of the different clairs and things like that. So there are different, modalities in the psychic field, just like, us in the paranormal field. We have, people are good at other things, different things. So no two are the same. I really don't think so. Not even two that are like clairsentient. You know what I mean? They're still not the same. They're not going to.
Yeah. And what I've found too, mediums all function in different ways, and how they get their information and what works best for them. My dad's case, I think he was really phenomenal because he had so many of the different clairs, and he had so many different ways of getting the information, and in a very accurate way. Going back to, like you said, it must have been tough growing up with him. It was, but not horrible. I think the thing is, he told us that, he let us get away with certain things because he wanted us to have a normal childhood.
But he knew everything.
It was harder on my older brother because my parents actually split when I was 11 or 12. But my brother was like 9 years older. So he was right in the middle of his teen years when my dad was there all the time. So he had to deal with that, with my dad shutting down his beer drinking and drag racing and all that kind of stuff. Right. And he even said to my father on one occasion, "How would you like to have a dad like you?"
Yeah.
As a retort. And my mother, here's a story that's kind of fun. When they first got married before I was born, she had been working on being a vegetarian for several months and had been successful at it. But one particular day, she just had a hankering for a burger, and she went out and got a burger. And my dad was gone all day, and he got back. And when he got home that evening, the first words out of his mouth were, "So, Shirley, did you enjoy your hamburger today?" So it was that kind of, it could be that kind of household from time to time.
Right. Yeah. See, I would just be like, oh, no. No. But so now, when did you start doing your own thing? Like, when did you start realizing that you had a gift, or was this something that happened?
Well, growing up, I really never sought to be my dad. He always said that I was very psychic, and I did have some episodes along the way. I remember one time, just as an example, we were watching a demonstration, and then he was done, and we were sitting in a booth, and he says, "Mark, I'm tired. Can you do the second demonstration for me?" In, tongue in cheek. I said, "Sure, Dad. Put your hands on mine." And he did. He put his hands on mine, and then it was just interesting. I felt kind of confident, or a different energy. And he goes, "Okay, here's your first test. What's that guy's name?" And he just pointed to a stranger. And so somebody in our booth tapped the guy on the shoulder. And before that, I said, "His name's Alan." For whatever reason, I just knew the name was Alan. And so somebody else tapped him on the shoulder and said, "What's your name?" And he says, "What? Like, what are you bothering me for?" He goes, "Just tell us your name." And he goes, "It's Alan." Wow. So things like that.
Yeah.
I think another really bizarre one happened when I was 18. I was dating a girl at the time that was a couple of years younger than me, and I had a dream that she was seeing another guy, so I was kind of jealous and whatever. But the odd thing was I knew what he looked like, and I knew his first and last name. So the next day I said I'd had this dream, and she said, well, tell me about it. I said, no, it's just a dream. There's probably nothing to it. She goes, no, I want to hear it. I said, well, the guy looked like this. He was this tall and this build, and his name was Bob Dooley. And she said, I dated a guy named Bob Dooley in Kansas, and he looked just like that. So for me, it was, the kind of spontaneous things here and there, but never really a concerted effort to really draw it out or develop it in a way where I wasn't looking to do readings for people or anything like that.
Right.
And really, most of us don't want to be our parents. So I went to college, got a degree, went into the business world, got married young, had a couple of boys. And so I was just kind of cruising along a very traditional, American lifestyle kind of thing. But it was my youngest son passed unexpectedly. And that's really what drew me back to this field. Thank you. It is the hardest thing that anyone can face, I think.
Oh, I mean, God.
Yeah.
Can't imagine.
But it was also the catalyst that drew me back to my dad's field and what I grew up with. And I since feel really like it's a mission that was really my life's work that I was meant to do. But all this other stuff that I did, being in the business world and managing people and learning to write, to communicate, to reason, would all help me later on with this field now being taken seriously, really, and being able to convey things in a way people can understand, to write books in a concise way, to be able to speak publicly. And so it's interesting how that training and development that was so worldly helps me with this now.
Of course. Yeah. But I find that it's true. And I don't know about you too, Mary Jane, but it's always something like, personally, I've always been into the paranormal, and I've, always kind of I've loved it, but I never got into the field like I am now, like we have Vortex Ghost Gear and Ghostly Excursions and Ghost Detectives TV and this and all, we run Penrose Paracon, we do all these things in the paranormal field. But beside that, what got me in it more so prominently was the death of my husband, and he was like so prominent. I always feel like there's a death involved with someone either seeking guidance from a psychic or getting themselves into the paranormal field.
Yeah, and for me, it was more of a re-entry, really, because I grew up with the father I had, was always proud of him and knew it was real and wanted people to see him. But again, I never really sought to be another version of him. But when this time frame came, I initially thought I would do a biography on my dad because it was something that I could put my heart and soul into. And, but, after doing some initial writing, kind of making my story kind of the preface to my dad, I hired an editor out of New York for the books, which became Soul Shift. And she said, you know what, Mark? You could write your dad's biography anytime, but I think you have your own story to tell. And that's really how it came about. And it was really a journey of discovery that I went on subsequent to my son Brandon's passing, kind of reopening up not only my dad's world, but expanding my own world in many ways and experiencing evidence for the continuity of my son's existence beyond physical death, not just through mediums, but through a variety of different phenomena that occurred. And that not only helped me, my wife as well, and extended family and friends to hear all of these things and kind of participate in them to some degree. And I would say our healing time was much shorter than most people who have a child pass. And I, in part, attribute it, to that hope piece. It's not the only piece. There's other things that are important as well, which I can talk about later, that I've actually discovered through the founding and expansion of Helping Parents Heal and just watching other people heal too.
Yeah, and everyone has their own process on that too. Like when my husband passed, it was crazy because he was
It was the 2711. So it's like I always say, just rolled craps completely. Okay. But he was downstairs in his office and he was sitting on a couch and he was slumped over with his head on a coffee table. When I went down, I'm tapping him because his workers showed up. He had a construction company and his workers were there. And I'm like, Mark, wake up, and then I picked him up, like, is he out cold? But when I picked him up, I knew, but like the fluid had run into his face. So it was like kind of, mushed down. Now, days later, I had friends of mine who were in the paranormal. They came over and we had a thermal camera. And she goes, well, let me just take a couple pictures down here because I heard him, and I'm just like, oh my God, And so she came over and we took this picture. Not this one, sorry. These pictures. See the top two there? And you see that face? That's a pillow that's on the couch that he was sitting on. But that's how his face looked. And it's like exactly like that. The eyes, the nose, the mustache, the mouth, the fluid that had pushed forward. That was exactly it. But he was on the coffee table, not on that pillow, So how he imprinted on that pillow like that, I will never understand. So I've been always like constantly trying to search to figure this one out. Mm-hmm. But it was so prevalent there, I mean, that's exactly what he looked like. I was just like, oh my God, blew my mind,
Mm-hmm. And how did that affect you? Was it helpful to you?
With him being there, it really was. See, he was a larger than life dude, he commanded presence. He wouldn't go to the store alone. He would call his friends and be like, hey, I got to go get cigarettes. Will you come with me? It's like they'd be coming from 3 towns over so they could go down the street. I'm like, what the heck? He just always had to have people around, but he was a very take charge guy. And as a matter of fact, I have the stories with him helping me in a book that Joni wrote, 2 things that he can. I used to wear the wedding band on my thumb, and I lost it, and he helped me find it. Stuff like that. Saved me from a fire in my house, like all these things. So yeah, it was very comforting. But as I got more comfortable, I was like, okay, please, you can go. But here's the kicker: is when I told you he was in construction. Okay, right. So I was going to design school at the time, and I built an addition on my house. And it's like I'm a faux painter, an artist, of this or that. I faux painted the whole house, like all over the place. And he's like, just please leave the living room alone. So I'm like, fine. It was beige, it was blah, right? And I went to Gary McKinstry, the psychic, with a friend of mine who really, she was wanting to go to the psychic. And he's like, as soon as I walked in, he's like, whoa, because I had so many people with me. And it was because of Mark, and he's like, I have to start with you. I'm like, oh, I'm not even doing this. She is, and he's like, oh no. And he tells me Mark has a bone to pick with me. And I'm like, why? I mean, I bent over backwards after he passed because I had to close businesses. I had to do everything. We didn't have anything for a funeral. I mean, it was like a ton of work, and I'm like, I did everything spot on, gave him the best funeral he could possibly imagine, expensive, all this stuff, and I'm like, why, what could he possibly mad, at? Now, in the meantime, I took that living room, right? And I took the plainness, I full painted the whole thing. All the way. Like it was a 20 by 20 room, 16-foot vaulted ceilings, everything. I full painted everything. Gary says to me, the psychic, you girlied up my living room, he says. Oh. And I was just like, oh my God. And I just started laughing. I'm like, yeah, I did. Mm-hmm. But I have him talking a lot, and I get a lot of I love yous, and I still have them on EVPs and stuff. So, but I did say, okay, I'm good now. You please go on and be with your family, and he's got his mom and dad and sister and stuff. Be with them.
No, I'm just getting over COVID. I was in Portugal and picked it up, so I've had some sinus pressure and stuff. But while you were telling me that, I had a little bit of a headache too, which just kind of came and went. So I didn't know if that had anything to do with his passing.
He actually had a heart attack.
Okay.
It was sudden. But yeah.
I figured it was probably a heart attack or a stroke or something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a sudden thing, but he would get headaches a lot. He was a stubborn Swede, right? He wouldn't do anything. If he stubbed his toe, he would go to a doctor, but he had high blood pressure and he wouldn't do anything about that.
Yeah,
he didn't think that was a real thing.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because that's one of the predominant contributors to heart problems. Yeah.
Right. I bought the machine. I'm like, well, take your blood pressure 3 times a day. Like the doctor said, no, you're not. I'm like, oh my God, So, let that be, if anything, that be.
And I'm sorry you had to go through that too.
Thank you. Yeah. It was devastating. I was devastated. It's like 2 weeks. I just was like, oh my God. But I had to go through, like, I don't remember doing it, going through and setting up the funeral and everything. But I knew the coffin. I was like, as soon as I saw it, and I'm like, and he loved fishing and hunting. And I'm like, yeah, it needs a deer. It needs fishing. It needs this. It needs that. I'm like, yes. And he would have loved it. Me, I don't want any of that. None of it. But
well, we all need something to help us over the hump sometimes, especially when you're going through a tragedy like that, and it means a lot.
And sudden, and if it was one of my kids, I don't know, I honest to God, my heart bleeds for you. And Raven said she too lost a son, and she's commiserating with you as well. And I can't imagine that. And how did he start showing up for you?
So, well, let's go back. The day that he passed, he was actually told me he was going to go on a hike with his buddies in the McDowell Mountains, which were the mountains behind our home in Scottsdale, Arizona. And a short time after that, I was sitting at my computer and I had this kind of feeling come over me that was a feeling of distress. And I almost felt like another presence there. And I didn't get that kind of thing all the time, but I just felt like he could be in danger. So I tried to talk him out of going. He was 18 at the time. And he's like, we're going, Dad. Like those were his last words to me. So he ended up getting with his buddies. They went and climbed this mountain. My wife and I were on the other end of town at that time doing other things. And I get a distress call late that afternoon from my older son, because the boys who were with Brandon on the mountain were looking for help, and they couldn't get their cell phones were very intermittent, so they couldn't get help. So they called Stephen, my older son, and Stephen called me, and he was at work and he was kind of frantic. So I said, I'll take care of it. So I called 911 and told the authorities that they needed a helicopter because they said he was passing out and feeling strange. So by the time we get home, there's a fire truck, ambulance, 100 people at the base of the mountain. It's kind of a scary scene, a very stressful scene. And a helicopter comes down, and within a short period of time, we were told that he passed. But we didn't really know how. And his best friend that evening came over and talked to me, and he just said, well, Brandon was, he said that his heart was kind of beating fast and his limbs felt kind of numb. And he'd had asthma before, but never really severely. And he had a puffer, and he had used that. So, but Stu, his friend, said it didn't seem like any kind of asthma attack that he'd ever seen or witnessed before. So anyhow, it was, I'd say the first thing that happened that I was able to ascertain as a connection or a sign was just within a day or two. I wanted like a direct connection, and I went into a darkened room. It was actually a walk-in closet, shut the door, so it was pitch black. Tried to meditate, and I actually was pretty successful clearing my mind and just asking for some sort of connection or sign from my son. And then like if the inside of my forehead was a movie screen, I saw his face go by, smiling and happy, like joyful. And then right after that was a cross with an oval loop at the top. And I'd seen those, but I really didn't know what they were. So this required me to go to Google and Google cross with oval loop at the top. And from that, I discovered it's an Ankh, which is the oldest cross of human history, with the lower portion representing physical life and the oval loop representing eternal life. So what I got was, hey, my son's happy, he feels good, and he's in eternal life. And it was through a symbol that I didn't understand that I had to find out about, which was more valuable to me because of my analytical mindset.
Right.
The next one was really, I had talked to my uncle shortly after Brandon passed, and we didn't know how he'd passed. And my uncle had similar abilities to my father because by this point, my dad had been gone a number of years. And my uncle said, is there anything I can do for you? I said, well, if you get any kind of message or whatever from Brandon, I would really appreciate it. It was a couple of days later, I was in the mortuary, and he called me, or I called him. At this point, I can't remember which it was, but he said, Mark, I've been meaning to talk to you. Last night I tried to connect in my meditation. I just couldn't get anything. But this morning, your dad came to me while I was meditating. He looks just like he always has. He hasn't changed. He has visited me in the past, but it had been quite a while. But he wanted you to know that he was there for Brandon when Brandon crossed over. He said Brandon was a little confused at the time, but your dad helped him adjust, and Brandon wanted you to know you're the best parents he ever could have had. Now, that's what we like to hear, but what I got in addition to that was evidence that I could validate. And so my uncle says, your dad said Brandon's death was caused by a lack of oxygen in his bloodstream that caused his heart to fail. 2 days later, I get a call from the autopsy physician, and she's like, your son had a severe asthma attack that where the lungs expand to the point of almost touching in the middle in an effort to try and get oxygen. That only happens in cases of severe asthma attacks or drownings. And she said that caused your son's blood oxygen levels to drop and for him to have cardiac arrest. So my uncle told me 2 days before the autopsy physician the exact reason, cause of death. So that was, a good piece of evidence supporting the other feel-good stuff.
Right, exactly. I know. I love that. My first partner in the paranormal was Chris George, and we would go on investigations, and I always relied on all my equipment. I would have these things every once in a while, I might get that picture, but I have clear cognizance, like I know how to do things, construction and this and that, all my work field. I would just look at something and I knew how to do it, or I could look at a room and I could blow it up in my mind, and I could just see all the different pieces and parts and I could pull it all apart, simply. And it's like I just instinctively or intuitively knew how to do stuff, right? And every once in a while I'd get a picture or, like the deja vu things and stuff, it's like, oh, I know this person. I would all of a sudden start thinking about that person calls, those types of things. But Chris blew my mind, but we would hold events and then he would say, all right, I see this person, blah, 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 blah. And I would ask on a recorder, and then I would get an EVP to coincide with what he was saying. And then he would do things too. He would whisper in my ear, stuff if we had people in front of us. And then I would ask a question, and then, or he'd write it down, because people wouldn't believe, so he'd write it down and stuff like that. And he was always like spot on, but, it's like, he's like, you can, psychics can say anything, but without that validation, you don't really know,
Yeah.
But, a lot of psychics and new budding psychics too won't say things, because to them, it's like, well, that doesn't really seem to make any kind of sense. So they won't say it. It'll be some weird word, I mean, just pull a word out of anything, like bachagaloop. Okay, that would mean something if my mom said it. You know what I mean? Because that's something that, the family has always said. So that's a word. That's what psychics really gonna know. Yeah, even if it's crazy, say it because it means something to that person that you're talking to.
And those kinds of things are the best pieces of evidence of all.
100%. 100%. Someone is asking, may I ask a question? Yes, you may ask a question. Hi, from Portugal. Yes, you may ask a question.
I was just in Porto and Lisbon.
Right? So please ask a question. put it up there, I will put it up. Yeah, and then Carmen was saying too, while you were asking a question, Carmen was saying, I had a dream just days after my great uncle passed. Day before his funeral service, took a seat next to his wife, my great aunt, and my grandmothers were there too. It was a message to me knowing that he was with our loved ones who passed, and that's fantastic. I love having those kind of validations too, because there's always
dream visits. Dreaming is a good way to connect, because we often in our daily conscious awareness are so wrapped up into everything else and critiquing everything, and it's actually, spirit communication is very subtle. So if you're in that other kind of a state, you're more receptive and open. I have had a number of visits with my son Brandon, one of which, though, just one, was the hyper real, like more real than this, where it was just mind blowing. And that came about 1.5 years after his passing. He, excuse me, he said something strange to me. I met him in a room that was white with 3 walls, and the 4th wall, where it should have been, was just empty space. And it was a doorway to infinity is what it looked like. And I was in there and I said, Brandon, I can't believe you're here. I missed you so much. I got to get Stephen and Mom and Stu to come see you. He says, I missed you. I said, I missed you so much since you died. And he said to me, I didn't die. He says, my father died, which is kind of like a puzzle. And then I don't remember anything after that, but it was hyper real. But it was, I guess, a little while later, his best buddy Stu was over. And I said, Stu, I got to tell you about this dream that I had. It was very real. It was very vivid. And I just told him what Brandon had said. And I'm like, I don't know what it means, and then I said, oh, I think I know what it means. And I said, I think what he was trying to tell me is that he didn't die, because he went on. He never really died as a conscious entity or a personality. But part of me, his father, died inside and was kind of reborn for the next stage of my life. So
yeah. That's definitely a transition. So Andre says, in Porto, Portugal, does David have romantic feelings for me? I met him 5 months ago, and I do love him a lot. And then he said after that, as a friend and more.
If it was my dad could answer you. I think, I get stuff in a spontaneous fashion now and then. If I get some feeling about that, I'll share it. But it's not like anything I do, on a regular basis. But you do live in a beautiful city and a lovely country. We enjoyed our trip there very much, except for getting COVID.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming Portugal for that. It was other tourists.
Yeah. But I'm always saying that too, what you had said, like, at night, I will tell people, they say, well, how can I get a message? How can I get a sign? How can I this, that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm always saying, ask at night. When you go to bed, ask the question at night, because of the fact that, like you said, during the day, your mind is racing. You're thinking about, you got to get the kids here. You got to go grocery shopping. You got to pay this bill. Oh, I got to go to work. I gotta, and then when you go to sleep, that's gone. Right before REM sleep, you have none of that. So the spirit sits there and waits for that time. And that's when you'll get those messages. I'm going to pull, I have these cards here. Okay. These are relationship cards.
Okay. Right? And I was going to give her an answer too, but you can go first if you'd like.
This says luck is on your side. Yes, luck is on your side. So I would say I would try to go for that relationship. Where were you?
What I was going to suggest is maybe she could just flat out ask where he's at, and try and have that kind of direct communication. My gut feeling is she may be a little further along than him at this point, but maybe there's hope for that. That's just kind of my gut, but I think it's worth a discussion, and maybe it's going to require patience for him to get to the same place she is.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So she does this with us too. And she's got she's got a lot of spirits going on in her house. She has like she's right on the ley line, honestly.
There's a lot happening.
runway through the center of her house, like right down her hallway, right through her house. There'll be all kinds of different entities. You tell them some of the things that you've experienced in that house.
Oh,
April is our other friend right here.
Hi, April. Yeah, I've had myths and voices, and there's a dog that likes to hang out underneath the kitchen table that everybody has seen in the house. My son on the property, my son has talked to the older farmer that stays in the barn. I looked out one day and he was just having a full-on conversation. I was like, who are you talking to? He's like, oh, it's the farmer. And I was like, oh, okay. We've had, when he was younger, there was an issue when he was going to school his first year. And I wish that I still had the recording, because I was recording him speaking on my phone, and he's telling me all about this and what he's seen, and this guy with flames. And I was like, oh, so he had a flame tattoo? And he's like, no, he was on fire. And I was like, okay. And then I have it. It was the first clear EVP I've ever gotten. And you hear this man whisper, I'm here. And there was nobody else in my house. It was, so there's been a lot of activity here. Sometimes
right. She's showing me pictures, and I'm like, there's a girl standing right there. There's a girl right there. It's like, see it plain as day. But it's just it's so crazy. April says, Mary Jane, I love your hair.
Oh, thank you. I'm due to get it done again, so thank you.
And Callie is asking, can you tell us about your mediumship program and who might qualify to attend?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So let me tell you how this came about. When my first book, Soul Shift, came out, after that, I had a lot of people reach out to me for recommendations on mediums, because they were kind of in the same boat I was, and they wanted to connect with their loved one who had passed through a medium. So initially, I was giving them the people I knew, who were mainly celebrity mediums, are very popular, and these are people that had long wait lists and maybe charged more just because of their notoriety in the field. So it occurred to me that there are probably other people that have this talent or ability that just aren't well known. And I thought if I could find them and put them through a battery of tests to really ascertain who's good enough, that I would put my name behind, to recommend to people. So that's really how it started. And that was in 2014. And today I've certified over 40. And what they have to do is go through 5 blinded test readings with someone they don't know via Zoom. So they're going to get on a Zoom call. They can't see the other person. The video is not to go on, at least not initially. And then they give them a reading basically through that medium. And during that, it's recorded. And at the end of it, now the sitter can ask to connect with a specific person, but only by first name. And that can be an aid or to keep the progress going on the reading. But all the statements that are made are recorded and then transcribed by the sitter. The sitter breaks them into individual statements, and those are graded as either correct, incorrect, or indeterminable. Indeterminable would be like a future prediction or something you don't know, you can't really grade it yet, or something that they can't find out an answer to, whether it's right or wrong. Maybe it's something to do with something far away in Europe, with somebody else there that they don't have any contact with or whatever. The sitter also can award bonus points for something. So, for example, there's 2 different levels of bonus points. There's a 2-point bonus and a 5-point bonus. A 2-point bonus might be, I have your son here, and I think his initial is A. Okay, let's say the kid's name was Aaron, and they get that. Okay, maybe that's a 2-point bonus. But let's say the medium says, I have your son here, his name is Aaron. That would be a 5-point bonus, okay? Or I think your son's favorite food was pizza. Well, if it was, maybe that's a 2-point. But if the medium says it's a pizza with pepperoni, olives, and mushrooms, right, and that's specifically what it was, that's a 5-point bonus. So maybe that gives you a flavor. And then statistically, I grade that out, and they have to have at least 75 points to pass. Now, they have 5 readings, so some might be higher, some may be lower, but overall they have to have 75 points, and that would equate to the percent of accuracy plus any bonus points. So let's say they're 65% accurate, and they got 2 5-point bonuses that would give them 75, they'd just barely pass.
Yeah.
Or if they were 80% or 90% accurate and had a few bonus points, they're going to pass easily. Through that, I've had a handful of people score in the 90s, pushing 100. And I've had some people eke by too, just barely pass. Yep. But 40 people have passed that way over 9 years.
Right. I got a question on that too, though. Sometimes things come through and the person being read doesn't understand. And I'm going to go personal here, because Gary was saying too, oh, you visited someone in a hospital and they thought you were an angel, right? Because I had blonde hair and the sun was behind me. So they said you looked like an angel. And I'm thinking it was the elderly customer that I had. And I thought it was her. And he's going, no. Here's my best friend, Kathy. I didn't realize that until later on. She was in hospice, and she was passing. So how can you grade if it's something, along those lines that the person itself doesn't really remember, but
we call it psychic amnesia is the word for it.
oh, okay. Because it's
so people will have psychic amnesia, but if you think about it, they're going to have that reading one day and it's recorded. And then they're going to have to go through the reading again a second time and transcribe it. That takes a lot of time. And then when they start going through the statements, and we do coach them, say, hey, in case you missed something, think about this, digest this stuff a little bit. Usually by the time they're grading it, it's a week, 2 weeks, even 3 weeks after the fact. So, and maybe something transpired too that was an indeterminable statement at the time now has come to light. Like they said, oh, you're gonna drive a Ford Pinto or whatever, and they do 2 weeks later. So I think that kind of addresses that issue for the most part, in that they're going to be touching that information multiple times. The first time, second time hearing it while transcribing it. And when you're transcribing, you have to pay close attention to what's being said. And then it kind of stirs in your mind. I had I told you I don't really do readings for people, but a friend recently lost her partner. He had passed. And so I visited her, and then I asked my dad to share anything with her that might give her comfort. So I gave her a bunch of things that just came to me as images in my mind. And they were mostly on target. I'd say maybe 10 out of 12 were meaningful to her. But one I said was, I saw a cruise ship, I saw the hull of a ship. And I said, a cruise ship. She goes, no. She goes, maybe that has to do with water, Well, then later we're all done. And she goes, oh, and we were talking about going on a cruise before he died. I'm like, do you remember what I said about
yeah.
She goes, and she's a medium. So she's like, I just did to you what people do to me all the time.
Exactly. I know, because you get I don't know what, I don't know what that block is there, but
it's I think we come with a certain expectation. If you're the sitter, you know what you want to hear, or you have an idea where this is going to go. And then if something doesn't fit it, it's like, no, not that. You're waiting for what you want. Right. But if you just have to be patient with it. And then even, maybe you don't get it immediately. And then later in the reading, oh, I know what that is, But for some people, it's even later than that they get it.
Yeah. Oh, I felt so bad. I did.
If the person who wrote that is interested in applying, if they're a medium or they think they have abilities, really, I'm looking mainly for people who have a practice now and are experienced, because you're dealing with grief-stricken folks. So it's a pretty sensitive thing. That's why we really strive for the best of the best. But if you fit that and you want to apply, just go to my website. There's a link there to the Certified Medium program, and you'll see the information, and you could just write to me.
Yeah. You can go here. You can watch his videos on his YouTube channel. All right, so markirelandauthor.com. You can go there. He's got a lot going. All right, we got some questions going on. Yeah, comments asked a few times. Oh, not that one. Where is it? They keep moving up. Okay, Colette, this one here. I would really like to know if a died person, must be a dead person, can give information about a live person. Yes.
I've seen that many times.
100% yes.
Yeah. I mean, the readings that I've had with top people will often address folks in my life, whether it's my other son or other family members and situations surrounding them. So I think so, absolutely. Really, the key is you got to go to somebody who's credible and really has the ability, because there are charlatans out there. And that's one of the other reasons I started the program, is to make sure that I had people that were vetted. There's no guarantee you're going to get a good reading, because the connection doesn't always work as well as you'd like. But more times than not, it increases your odds of having it, and you're dealing with somebody ethical. So that's really where it comes down to. But, it's funny. Even more than charlatans, I found there's a lot more people that are kind of deluded. Like they think that they really got that, or they really want to be that, but they have like this much of it, And so that's fine. For those folks, I would almost encourage them, use it for your own inner guidance in your life. But if you don't have it to the degree that you can provide meaningful evidential information that's healing to folks, then you probably shouldn't be trying to do it, because unless you're training and developing and you're just starting out and you really feel like you have that as an innate ability. From my experience, the people who are very best, they're born with it. You can develop to a point, but you're born with it. My dad was born with it. A lot of the people I've met are born with it. And interestingly, a lot of them, one common factor is severe trauma in their upbringing of some sort. So I don't know if that makes you more introspective or go within more or whatever, but that's what I've seen.
Right. Yeah. Stan is saying the same thing. Some people come into a reading with a preconceived idea of who they want to connect with. Problem is, one spirit may not be ready to talk with them, but another one is ready, and that's 100% it. And yep, Mark was saying the same thing. There was another question up here about something about a pendulum. Raven and Callie have a pendulum that continuously moves. Right. Usually when you do a pendulum, right, you got to hold it let it free flow. When you put it over your hand, you can always ask the question. It usually vibrates if something really wants to talk. If it's moving, a spirit really wants you to ask a question. So if it's vibrating, or just slightly moving, just first of all find out what yes is. Say, show me what yes is, and already yes is a circle. And then you say, show me what no is, please. And then you wait for. Okay, no. All right, so there you go. So now you ask your questions, but it will shake and it will move if something wants you to connect. And if that's the way that you can do it, then that's the way that you can do it. You can start out with yes, no questions. There are pendulum charts that you can use that they can spell out, so you can get and they're free. You can go online and you can print out free pendulum charts,
I've never used a pendulum. I met one person who had, and he's a totally honest, good person. And I think he didn't even consciously know this, but as he's holding this and getting the answers, I could tell that his hand's moving a little bit. So I think you got to be honest with yourself too. And that's just the other part of the skeptical part.
You can hang them off the holder.
So that's what I would recommend, either have it in a fixed position, or if you have to touch it for reasons of energy, I don't really know how they work, but if you do, then have your hand connected to something fixed.
Yeah. It's like you really got to be very steady. You know what I mean? But you'll feel the actual stone vibrating. You'll feel it if you have it over your hand. You'll feel the energy here.
And I believe that is true.
But I've seen some.
But you got to, just like anything else, you have to do it
like
right.
this with it. And I'm just like, no, you got to hold it as steady as you can, or put it on a hanger. They do make them for the hangers, and ask that. Like we create paranormal equipment. We just created the world's first. There's only one and only hands-free Ouija board. Because people are always saying about Ouija boards. I don't know what you feel about Ouija boards, but that people put their hands on and they point. They move it. They point to the letters. If you blindfold them, then all of a sudden they can't spell. But this, what Bob came up with, and he did this in his own mind, is it's all sensors. So you actually have to, the spirit comes in and points to a letter or a number, and it lights, and no person involved at all.
Okay, it seems like it makes sense to me in terms of if you're going to use one.
Yep. Yep, 100%. You know, so this is it. You know, that's it. There's no. Let me get that comment off. I don't know where it is. Raven. Here we go. There.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's like they light up the numbers, they light up the letters, but like anything like that in those lines, you always got to say goodbye, close that door.
There's some creepy looking hands there.
I know that just, you know, that's for a show, for, you know, events and whatnot. But the board itself, it's big. It's so many wires in there. It's ridiculous. You know? But, you know, we always, you know, we believe, but, you know, in this field, people fake a lot of stuff, you know, so we do try like debunking and things, or, you know, make it happen again or whatever.
You want the real deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we get it, you know, like I get a lot with thermal, for sure. It's like, that's like, seems to be the thing that I just have a knack of catching in ABPs, you know. But, you know, it's a pretty dynamic field, and everyone has their ways of doing things, and everyone thinks, like we were talking about this before,
Yeah.
Jane, right? Like everybody thinks their way is the only way and the best way, and it's not true. It's not true. You know, there are many ways to investigate. There's many ways people get information from the other side, and then how that other side wants to communicate with us, you know, so that I could have all my equipment out there, everything that we make, and we make stuff for everything, you know, for manifestation, for vibration, for everything, right? So there's a piece of equipment for everything, but they might not want to do any of that. They might want to come tap you on the shoulder. You know what I mean? And then, so you never know what's going to happen. You're going to have every piece of expensive equipment in the world, and wait, are you going to get a personal experience?
Right. And back to, I guess, stepping back to what we were talking about a little bit before, like some of the earliest signs I had after Brandon passed. One of the, this is kind of interesting, and this is a case involving some synchronicity too. It was about 1 month afterward, 3 weeks to a month. It was February, where my son passed in January. And I was watching the NBC affiliate local news in Phoenix, and they were showing something about a study being done by the University of Arizona with mediums. And the clip they showed Alison Dubois, the real Alison Dubois, before the show Medium came out, who was doing a reading, a blinded reading for some people where she couldn't see them or communicate with them, and she just had to read for them. And then they did a recap with that family to talk about how accurate what she said was. And I was really intrigued, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. And the evidence she gave was really compelling, and it was very specific. And I thought, geez, I'd love to get a reading from her, and I'd love to be in that lab someday. The very next day, I got a phone call from a man named Jerry Conser in Dallas, Texas, who knew my dad. And he says, hey, Mark, I know what you've been through, and I know someone who may be able to help you. Her name's Alison Dubois. And here's a phone number you can call to get a reading schedule. And I did end up in that lab too, you know, about a year later for an experiment with another medium, Lori Campbell. And that was taped for a Discovery Channel episode, which is actually on my website. There's a link to that if anyone wanted to see that.
Awesome.
But so if you fast forward to the Alison Dubois reading, which happened a number of months later because she had a long wait list. And again, fortunately for me, this is before the show Medium came out. So she really hadn't hit full, you know, blown celebrity status yet, but she did have a long wait list because she was good.
Yeah.
2 weeks before I met with her, someone who knew my dad gave me a box, and I said, what's this? And he says, well, it's a manuscript your dad wrote. And I opened it up, and it was all 8.5 by 11 type pages. It said, Your Psychic Potential, A Guide to Psychic Development, Dr. Richard Ireland, 1973. So I'm like, okay. I said, well, my dad passed 12 years ago. How'd you get this, and why are you giving it to me now? And he goes, well, your dad gave it to me for safekeeping because you were out of state at the time. And why I'm giving it to you now, I don't know. I just feel like I'm supposed to. And then 2 weeks later, I have the reading with Alison. And one of the first things she says to me is, well, I have your father here, and he showed me a book, but I feel it's his book, and he's handing it to you. It's for you to take forward. Does that make sense? And I'm like, yeah, I think I know what that means.
Right.
So,
That's amazing.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, I just love things like that. They give me goosebumps when things like that happen. You know?
Well, another one that isn't really involving mediumship, but it was another form of contact that was interesting. If you go back to the day my son Brandon passed on the mountain, there was another group of hikers, adults, that saw the boys off in the distance and were trying to kind of race them to the top. But then later they saw kind of a distress signal and them yelling out, so they ran over and tried to help. By that point, my son was flat on his back and probably gone already. So this group of people couldn't do anything to help. And one of them later met. He's like, God, why didn't you let me help them? I don't know why you put me here and had me come over there if I couldn't do anything to help this kid. So we had an online obituary, and there was a message on there written by a lot of people, but this particular guy, he says, we were there on the mountain with your son. If you'd like to meet me and talk, here's my contact information. So we did reach out. His name was James Linton, and he's a musician. My son was a bass player. James is a guitarist, songwriter, and vocalist. And anyhow, we got to know him, became friends with him, and we'd start bringing people to see him play live and things like that. And so at the 6-month mark after Brandon passed, we were going on a cruise, and that cruise was intended to celebrate Brandon's high school graduation. But since he wasn't physically there to go with us, we took his best buddy, Stu, and our older son, Steven. So after a 7-day cruise, we get back home. And before we had left, my wife, Susie, had loaned Brandon's bass guitar to James Linton because James was recording some new original music. He didn't have a bass. And the other tricky thing was James is left-handed and Brandon was right-handed, but he had to play this thing upside down. So the day we get back from the cruise, Susie's sitting there at the foot of our bed, and actually 6 months before this, an intuitive had told me that I'd see Brandon at our bed at about 6 months. So here it is, 6 months. It was very close because I didn't see Brandon. It was my wife, Susie. She's sitting at the foot of our bed. She senses his presence and sees him as a shadow figure out of her peripheral vision. Now, here's what makes it more compelling. So she loved that and told me about it. It was awesome. The next day, she gets a call from James. And James says, hey, Susie, I've got something to tell you, but I don't know how to tell you. And she thought he'd broken the bass guitar.
Yeah, right.
But he says, well, I was recording this song, and while I was doing it, I started feeling another presence in the recording room with me. And I saw a shadow figure out of my peripheral vision. And then I saw flashes of white light. I thought I was hallucinating, so I went and got something to eat. I drank water. I took a shower. But each time I came back, it was stronger and stronger. And at that point, I just said, okay, Brandon, what do you want? And then he felt guided from that point on to totally redo this song, redo the bass line, and the lyrics were all changed. And the song became what was called The Other Side. And he told us, he said, this is the best song. He says, this is the best song I've ever written, but I didn't write it.
Oh my God. I want to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a link to the song on my website. So it's under the media, under the media tab.
Okay. All right. Oh my
So
God.
I've had so many things happen. I know other people who have been through this haven't had as many, and that's just scratching the surface. There's so many more than that.
I know.
But it's just, I feel so blessed to have had those things to help us through and to help other people too. Because, I think everyone, if you're say you're in a group reading and a medium gives really good messages to 2 or 3 people, everyone can benefit from that, whether it's for them or not. Because it's like if one of us makes it and we're there, we all do, and then it's maybe a matter of time before somebody gets their own connection or their own signs. And sometimes they're getting them, they just don't recognize it. They're looking for the burning bush, and they're not being reasonable.
I know. Mm-hmm. Did you have a cell phone that was going off in the background? Did you have a cell phone going off?
No, I didn't, but I heard that. It sounded like a kid's video game or something, is what I heard.
Yeah, I thought it was like a
Yeah,
cell
there's
phone.
nobody here. I've got my door shut in my den.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, then we are hearing something. Okay. I thought
Yeah.
it was just someone's cell phone. So
Yeah, no.
okay, there was
Brandon,
something. I heard it, and they
It
heard
sounded like a video game or a
it. Yeah,
TV. Yeah.
it's a
Brandon used to
notification
play
or
video games before he passed. So
Well,
hey,
definitely mark it
I'm
and see if we
gonna-
can hear it after.
yeah, I know. What time is it? It's
right
9.
about 1 hour mark, or
Yeah, we're
just
at
a little
the
before.
Yeah.
that. So yeah, okay.
Yeah,
We'll play
8:58.
that back. But I definitely heard it too, and I did it. I thought it was a cell phone or something, you know. But yeah, that's cool. So Shelly heard it, Carmen heard it. Oh, and that they said that pendulum was on a stand or is on a stand. Just asking
Yeah.
questions, asking questions. Um, and Carmen says like wind chimes. Yeah, it did. It was a chimey, tingy sound.
Okay, now my phone just did that after you said that, but it's a ring notification thing. So our front door, we have one of those ring bells.
So
I
that's
don't know
not
if
it.
was that.
So there you
For a
go.
few
So there's the
seconds.
validation. There's the
Yeah.
validation. Like, no, it's not the phone because this is the phone. Right? So that's okay. All right.
Yeah.
We are connected. This is awesome. You know, and we always have, I always say it too, you know, there's so many, there are more dead people on the planet than there are living. So, you know, they're always around, and they, you know, how they choose to connect, if they choose to connect. Do you believe that they are on multi planes?
Yeah, I do. I do. Um,
There it
but
is
this
again.
goes back to
Yeah.
kind of my training and upbringing and how my dad explained things. And I think I view the purpose of life as evolution of the soul, where we come in and we're to be refined. And through some of that trauma or suffering and things like that, refine us as well. But for us to become better people, to be more compassionate and be understanding and be of service, all those kinds of things are part of our evolution. So I think there, I think on the other side, I don't know that it's kind of a linear kind of thing, but I just think it's kind of like specific gravity, you know, something floats to its own level. So the more evolved you are, maybe the further you are from the earth plane, although you probably still have the ability to reconnect in some way. A lot of the mediums I talk to describe the process for them of them elevating their vibration, so the medium, so and the person's spirit lowering their vibration to meet kind of in the middle. So, but I do subscribe to that, and I know you've heard there's a term earthbound spirits and things like that. I don't think just because someone's able to connect with someone on the other side, they're necessarily earthbound. Maybe some are. Maybe they don't understand that they can move on, and they should be in another realm that's for their ongoing progression. And I think, you know, I've also heard, and I think this makes some sense, that sometimes what people call ghosts might be kind of an echo from energy that's a residue in a particular building or place that's giving off that kind of feeling. A good friend of mine, John Holland, is a really prominent medium in New England. Yeah, and John, there's a
I'm from
video.
Massachusetts, and she's up there
Right.
now.
Okay, you probably know Marie
I follow
Hancock.
him actually. I get his emails all the time.
Yeah, he's a good friend. He was just out here on the West Coast not too long ago, and we had dinner with him. But another one that's, you know, in that same grouping is Maureen Hancock. She's wonderful. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's really good. But she lives in Boston or suburban Boston. But
No.
but anyhow, if you do a Google search for John Holland, and they took him blindfolded to a building, and I think it was in Boston, maybe it was in New York, I can't remember. But they put him in this building and had him describe what he felt in there, and it was very distressing. It brought him to the point of tears, and he just felt flames and suffering and all this kind of stuff. It turned out that it was kind of a sweatshop for textiles back, you know, 100 years ago or whatever, where they'd had a fire break out and it killed an inordinate number of people. But his feeling about that was it was a residual energy there, not necessarily that there were spirit beings in the room, but it was the residue of that event in terms of energy.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I don't claim to know everything, you know.
I run across that type of things. Like
Yeah.
you know, I always say a ghost is a person that dies and hasn't crossed over yet, and a spirit is a person that's crossed over and can come back. You know what I mean? And they are either able to be your spirit guides or, you know, help you, and they're more enlightened, you know, blah, blah, blah. But the ones that don't want to cross over, or they're either, they died suddenly, you know, and they don't realize that they're dead yet, you know, or they're afraid to cross over because they've done something so horrific here that they don't feel like they're going to be forgiven over there, or they're really desperately hanging on to the human emotions, which they don't need to, you know. So like us as investigators, that's what we have to go in and find out, right? What is it? What is the issue with this spirit or ghost, right? What is your problem, you know? And are you afraid? Like, did you commit an act so horrific, you know? Yes, you can be forgiven. We have to convince them of that so that they can cross over, you know, and move on to the next plane. And then, but then there are the souls like I got 15 apparitions walking on a flare, and it was in a sunken basketball court at a feeble-minded boys' school. Now I know that they're intelligent because they didn't come out of the dressing room. I was in the basketball court, right? I was under one of the hoops. They were about to come out, and they stopped, and they were going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and you know, and they it's like they were too afraid to come out, you know. Otherwise, they would have been out and playing, you know, around us if they were residual. So you know that they're intelligent because they're making that choice, you know. But I mean, I have that. I could show it to you if you wanted to see it. I got just a minute clip of it, you know.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
You can see a few of them on there walking, because the whole clip is 15 minutes of 15 apparitions walking. And
don't be afraid of that device. It's just so we can hear you talk. We don't want to hurt you. Come on in. Come in. Yeah. Come in. Hello. Hi. Yes, it is. What is it? Are you recording it? Yes. What's your name? You want to play basketball with us? Could you move again? Hello? Keep coming. It's okay. We're not going to hurt you. Right there. Look at. You got a second. Don't be afraid of us. Come in. If that's you, come in.
see, so like, I know, right?
It was
so
like backing up.
Yeah, it was just like it was the door frame, and it was like in the door. It was like ready to come out, and then like we saw some other ones. They were peeking and then going back, and then it would be like 5 of them walked under there and then went back, you know. And it's like they were like more curious of us. And then while that was going on, I had a spirit box going, which had nothing, absolutely nothing, but they were there. And there was one up above because it was a sunken basketball court. There were 2 chain link fences up above, and there was one holding onto the fence, and he was looking down like this, and he was just going like this. And I got him perfect. You know, you could see the gripping on the fence and everything on the flare. It was just like phenomenal. But the whole clip is 15 minutes. And at the time when I made that, you couldn't email anything more or send anything more than a minute. So I clipped it to that, you know, because I was like, well, what's the best part? That there's a lot going on at once, you know, because if you watch the whole thing, you'll see them. And then it's like, it seems like they're not there, but they're just staying perfectly still, you know. So that's another thing about investigating and going over evidence. It's like the patience to sit and watch and sit and listen, and, you know.
It's a process.
So yeah, it's a definite process, but it's exciting when you get these things, you know. And like that's how I met Mary Jane. Is investigating where she was working, you know. And there were issues going on there, and we went in there and did an investigation, a whole big group of us, and there certainly was stuff going on there.
Yeah.
But,
it didn't stop either.
No, we didn't do anything to get
probably
rid of
even worse now because they're renovating it. So.
Oh yeah. And that's another thing. When I was like doing designs and interiors and things like that, you talk about paranormal with them, it's like very poo-pooed upon, you know. And I'm like, You're going to tell me that you're not ripping off this wallpaper and you're not getting all kinds of noises going on in the background that someone is not happy with you ripping off this wallpaper, because I got that all the time, but no one wanted to hear it. They didn't want
Are you familiar with is it the Enfield case? Have you heard of the Enfield?
Yes. Yeah, with the kids.
So there's a man, he's passed since, but I knew Guy Lyon Playfair, who was really into all the investigation about that, but he's really well regarded, and he was a journalist.
Yep.
But I know he's written books about that particular case. But he was also interested in other things deemed paranormal. He had another book called Twin Telepathy, and it was the idea that twins have this kind of connection, a telepathic connection. And he was interested in mediumship. I actually met him in 2005. We were invited to someone's home where there was a medium that was attempting to do independent voice phenomena. The session wasn't completely successful, but it had its moments. And so I met him there, and I met some others who were in the field at the time. And that's how I actually got to meet Linda Williamson, who's
I know who she is.
Well-known medium from England. She's since retired, but
I went to see her in
did you?
Worcester one time. Yeah, the Hanover.
So Linda Williamson became famous because when I'm trying to think, John Edward and his mother had agreed on a secret phrase that they would be used if one of them died before the other. So she passed, and he went to two other mediums before Linda Williamson to see if they could get the secret code.
Right.
But they were unsuccessful. But with Linda, early on in the reading, she said, I have your mother here, and she says that she's the guiding light in your life. He said, that's it. She was a soap opera fan, and her favorite soap was The Guiding Light.
Awesome.
So that's how her. But the funny thing was, when I did have a reading from her, it was pretty interesting. It had a lot of precognitive stuff in it, because it was talking about my role in a broader group of people, some on the earth plane and some on the other side. We're very interested in bringing more knowledge and understanding of this stuff to the masses. And she says, you're part of this group, whether you know it or not. And she said, and she brought through some names of people who I had heard of or that were researchers in the past. Like Montague Keene was one of them. He was in the UK. He was a well-regarded researcher. But she talked about how this was going to get bigger and bigger. And, I didn't have to do anything special other than just be myself and share my truth with people. And this would just take on a life of its own. And she also said, we always think things will happen in a certain time frame, but we aren't always in control of that. I kept waiting for something, waiting. And it's just like so slow. And here it is many, many years later. And this Helping Parents Heal organization now has 25,000 members worldwide. We have 100 affiliate chapters. We had our second conference in 2022, and we're going to have another in 2024. We drew 900 people, sold out the hotel.
That's amazing.
So, yeah. So, and that's just one aspect of it. The other is just, the books that I've written, and then the notoriety that they're getting now. And I just found out I'm going to be on Coast to Coast, which is pretty cool.
Oh, be still my heart, man. I would love that. I would love that. Oh, I got to hear that when that comes out. That's amazing. Good for you.
Thank you. But yeah, it's just interesting how many things she said have really come to pass. And I believed her, with the information she was bringing through, like, this is a bigger thing and there's more people involved. Because if I look at this whole field of afterlife communication, mediumship, near-death experiences, all these things are much more in the public eye now than even 10 years ago, especially 20 years ago.
Oh, God.
And there's much more interest in them,
And our kids too, because when we were growing up too, if you talked about anything like this, I mean, I'm 5 years old and my grandfather appears to me, and he had passed the night before, and I said, he said, they're grabbing my feet, and he was saying to my parents and my aunts and uncles that there were gremlins at the foot of his bed, trying to grab his feet and trying to grab his blankets. So she's just like, how'd you know that? And I'm like, because he told me, and then he had passed that night, but it was never mentioned again. You know what I mean? And it was like, you don't talk about those things. And today you do. Her son, if you've seen him, you talk about auras. Now, do you see auras? You talk about auras in the book. But
I don't see them. I've had people tell me that they see them. And I did touch on it lightly.
It's a gift. Yeah, it's a gift on other people. But like her son shines. Like he is something. He is going to be something. He's very powerful. You know what I mean? I don't know exactly what he's going to morph into, but it's palpable. You know what I mean? Like I don't see auras, but I can see him, and it's crazy. It's just crazy. And he's such great kids, But the thing is when you have a kid like that, and today with the information available, you can do something with it. You can follow up with it. You can develop it earlier in a good way, and not
constructive way, yeah.
So and slowly. But it's
nice to think kids could be encouraged now instead of discouraged from when they have these abilities. Think about my dad's era. He was born in 1932.
Yeah, I can imagine.
He grew up in the 40s. So his dad, he and his dad didn't get along at all. It was a very contentious relationship, and even when he was presenting his psychic abilities, in the 60s and 70s, it really had to be packaged more as entertainment,
Right.
Right.
There's a clip of him on the Steve Allen show that you can see on my website too. There's actually two parts, both are 10 minutes, but you'll get a flavor for what he did in terms of the public venues. And it's really phenomenal. It's very representative of what a normal demonstration would have been like if you went to it. And I have some crazy stories from people who have reached out to me over the last 20 odd years with their stories involving my dad. I'll tell you one that's one of the craziest. And this will really make you question the whole idea of time and the reality of what is there really time, or is it just our perception of how things are in this dimension? But I was going to do a talk, I think it was like 2010. And I had an audience of about 100 people. And a woman came up to me and she says, "Oh, Mark," she says, "I have a story to share with you." And she actually printed it out and gave it to me, but she said, "I'll tell it to you anyhow, but here's a printed version of it just for me to keep." And she said, "Well, my name is Norma Poling. I first saw your father in 1963 at the Good Samaritan Auxiliary." Well, Good Samaritan was a hospital in Phoenix, an auxiliary meeting. And your dad did a psychic demonstration. So he asked us to write questions on pieces of paper while he was taped and blindfolded. And I was trying to think of what to ask. And I thought, well, I'll either ask, will I have a fourth child, or will I get my master's degree? But I only wrote the one about the master's degree. I sent the question up, and I didn't think he was going to get to me, but at the very end, he did. He told me I would get the master's degree. And then she said, I did later get the master's degree. But then I didn't see your dad for 5 years. I came back 5 years later and saw him. And then I sent up a whole new question. But when he got my paper, he said, Norma Poling, I see you had that fourth child.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So that's the thing she'd only thought of 5 years earlier and never wrote down.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Oh my God.
That's the dad I lived with. So
yeah.
Nothing would surprise you.
Yeah. I just couldn't. I don't know. Even the little things that I would get here and there, people would be like, why don't you develop things like that? And it's like, I don't want to. I don't want to have anything like that all the time. I don't. Like I know there's a lot of stuff going on here.
In many ways, it was a burden too. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I like my equipment. I like validation. If it's really prevalent, I'll get it. And I'll see it. And I see buying this house. I got a 100-year-old house. Buying this house. This was the one I wanted. It went up for pending 3 different times before I got it. I looked at a whole ton of other houses. I'm like, I don't want those houses. I want this one. But coming in here, I saw the man on the 3rd floor. that's like, I knew that was him, and that's Stan, and that's his area, and he's very prevalent. And my neighbors all told me all about him, and I'm like, that's who I saw, up there. But I mean, I didn't think anything bad about him. He got angry because he had books up there that he wanted, so he would start yelling about his books. And I have all that on recordings, even on the spirit box. It was like, I want my books. And it was like, boom. And I had a friend of mine, Bella, who actually lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. She was here. She's part of Ghost Detectives. I don't even think she stood up out of the chair. I think she butt lifted up out of the chair and ran down. She was gone. It was hilarious. But I was like, Stan, because he had like floor to ceiling books up there. And I was like, well, they had to get rid of your books. Half of them are dry rotted. They had to throw them away. And this is the thing. You have to just explain, and it's like, they donated some of your books because he was a psychologist too. So he had psychology books, but he loved Western civilization books. And I have one, I have tons of books, right? I have one Western civilization book in a library downstairs that kept going and being put on my floor. It's like this thick. It's very heavy book, right? And I'm yelling at Bob. I'm like, why do you keep putting this book on the floor? He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, the book on the floor, why are you doing that? I put it back on the shelf and then be back on the floor. I'm like, cut it out, And then I found out about the books and about Stan. And then I gave him the book up there. I said, here's that book. I go out, and if I go to a library and I see a Western civilization book that I think he might like, I grab it and I throw it up there for him. And he's been very content with that. But I said, I'll try to see if, there was a location where your books were donated and maybe I could get them back. But the ones that were thrown away, they were just too bad. They were just rotted. I don't know if you realize that or not, but they were. So he calms down. It's like you have to diffuse it. It's like you're a counselor, basically. So if you're going into someone's house and doing the same thing, it's like you're counseling them. And you're counseling the spirit, and you can get them to coexist. And if not, one or the other has to leave.
It needs to be a divorce in that case, right?
Yes, exactly. So, whether, and if the spirit doesn't want to leave and the person who owns the house doesn't, want to leave, then, you have to really kind of force the spirit out, but try to do it nicely,
If you want me to keep with some of the stories that are interesting, I will.
Yes.
Here's one that's not involving my dad, but this person's actually staying with us right now as a guest. But her name's Molly Morningstar. She's a medium, good friend, known her for years. Her parents were hippies, and that's how she got the name. It's actually her real middle name, but now she's just using it as Molly Morningstar, first and last name.
Wow.
But she came to visit us in 2014 in January. So she said, hey, since you're putting me up, I'm going to give you guys a gift as a reading as a gift. So we're like, okay. So she first started with some stuff about my mom and my mom had just passed within the last year. So it was accurate. It was on target. It made me laugh, some of it, for reasons that are too long to explain. But after that, she says, well, Brandon's here and he's excited about his brother's upcoming wedding. Now, Stephen was to get married in May of 2014. So this is January 2014. She says, Brandon says that someone else can be the best man as a stand-in, but he's the real best man. And she says, and I think Stephen's going to wear a really nice suit, but it won't be a tuxedo, but a really nice suit. And I think he's going to have something tucked in his pocket, like a little memento. And I think it'll have a picture of Brandon on it. So fast forward 5, and she says, remember 2 p.m. Remember 2 p.m. So fast forward 5 months to May 14th. We're at a destination wedding in France in the Loire Valley, which was awesome. And the day of the wedding comes along. Just before the wedding, a couple hours before, one of the groomsmen comes up to me and he says, hey, Mark, here's a gift for you from Liz. And Liz was another friend of the boys. She knew both Brandon and our son, Stephen, who was getting married. And I said, well, what is this? He said, well, since she couldn't make it here to France for the wedding, she wanted you to have this as a gift. I opened the box up. It's got these little pictures of Brandon as like a frame memento with a stick pin. So, and there was enough for Stephen, me, and the groomsmen to all wear one. And my wife learned of this at 2 p.m.
Oh my God.
That's awesome.
See, again, I'm getting the goosebumps. I love when I get goosebumps.
As you can see, I get a lot of these kinds of things, probably more than the average person, but I never take them for granted, and I always appreciate them.
Exactly. And you pick up on them, and that's the thing. That's a lot of people are always saying, why can't I get signs? Why can't I get signs? You know, I'm like, well, are you looking? You know, because it could be something, you know, the change on the ground, feathers. There's different signs that mean different things, you know, and it's just a lot of people don't overlook them because they're so damn busy.
Something very subtle, you know, a song even. That's something we've had a lot of, like with Brandon, like Pink Floyd, and Wish You Were Here became our signature song. And I've mentioned that in the book that we were, excuse me, I'm going to let you talk for a minute. I'm going to take a restriction.
Have a drink. Yeah. So the things, you know, that when you were mentioning one of the things that you said about that, oh my God, what was it? When you were getting something, your degree or whatever, I did read that part in the book. So I was skimming through the book and I did read that one thing. And I was like, hey, that's something that I did read. There was something else in here that I did. I printed a few different sheets. And hold on. I need these because I'm old.
Don't feel bad. I've got a pair too.
That was the aura. Oh, and then it was, you were talking about, and I didn't know this, that about auras, and it said that spots in an aura are angels. I never even thought of that. And then
that's not my claim. That's just from what I looked up and researched. You know, that was the information that was shared.
Oh, that's cool, because I have not heard that. So I like to learn different things, you know. But you listed all the clairs that you had in here, and you had clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentience, telepathy and precognition and psychometry and I don't even know how to say psychokinesis. I don't know.
Psychokinesis.
Yeah. Remote viewing, remote perturbation.
So that's like affecting the physical system through mental work. Dr. Dean Radin, I don't know if you've heard of his name, but he's done some different studies on things like your ability to affect numbers coming up that are randomly generated numbers. That might be an example of that phenomenon.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. But I was like, you don't have claircognizance down there. You need to add that in there.
Yeah, when I put the list together, I had a certain list, and Stanley Krippner, who's a parapsychologist who wrote an endorsement on the back of the book, he really gave me a couple other clairs that I added to the list there, and the one you just mentioned was one of them. Remote viewing I added too, but I've always viewed remote viewing as just clairvoyance at a distance. I think it's really just clairvoyance. It's just a different aspect of clairvoyance.
Yeah, like the shaman have that, you know, like Mike Robichaud, you know, and the ability to send, you know, like to be able to cleanse and to clear from a distance, you know, but to actually be able to see in the room. I think that's the thing that they definitely teach the shaman, you know, but that would be a freaky thing. That would be something I don't think I'd want to know. I would want to, you know, I would just think
telepathy. I mean, telepathy has been statistically proven in the Duke Parapsychology Lab years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Statistically. But a lot of people look at mediumship as telepathy between a deceased person and a living person.
Yep.
And that's how it works. I don't know if that's the only method, but it seems like the most common explanation for how mediumship works.
Yeah. Well, talk about the other things that are in your book for people that are going to be buying the book.
Sure.
Because I'm going to be reading it. I did skim, and it was very, very interesting what I've seen so far. I want to put this.
So what's my first book, Soul Shift, was more of a memoir. This one is unique in that I'm blending personal experiences with scientific evidence to support them. So I kind of do that throughout. I share different experiences that I have, and then I talk about the evidence that's there scientifically to back up these phenomena. I'd say some of the unusual aspects of the book are, first off, I'm challenging skeptics or people that claim they're skeptics, but they're actually more debunkers. And the thing is, they have a worldview that they're not willing to reconsider. And that worldview is called materialism or physicalism. And that worldview is that nothing's real unless it could be measured or whatever as a physical system. Yeah. Whereas, somebody who views consciousness as primary doesn't view it that way. Consciousness is fundamental. It's like, okay, then really, if you look at quantum physics, and I don't know if you know anything about that at all, but this really the study of subatomic particles and their characteristics, but really they can only theorize certain things to a certain point because they can't observe down to the smallest particles or even know what those particles are made of at a certain level. What they do know through the observer effect is through experimentation repeatedly, it's been demonstrated that mind affects matter. And this has been validated through what's called the double slit experiment, to where a photon of light going through, I can't even remember how to describe this, but basically there's two holes. It either goes as a particle or a wave, depending on whether it's observed or not. So it's shown that consciousness, you're just observing this system, has an effect on it. Well, that tells you that you're connected to that system, and that system is probably controlled in some way by consciousness. It's not the other way around.
Right.
And the other one in that whole field that's really interesting to me is entanglement. And this has been validated as well. So here's the rub. According to Einstein's theories, or the theory of special relativity, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second. Okay, but the scope of the universe is so immense. Even at that speed, it would take tens of billions of years to traverse from one end to the other. However, entanglement has been demonstrated that two particles that ever come into contact in a special way can be separated apart as far as the opposite end of the universe. Whatever happens to one is instantly reflected in the other. So that, to me, those are the two mind-bending parts of it.
Those are the things, those are the fundamentals and the basics of time travel and this and that.
I'm not even saying that I understand it all or purporting that I'm some sort of expert. I'm just saying those things, just to know that much really kind of shakes at the foundation. So I'm getting off track here a bit. So there's a chapter focused on true skepticism, which is somebody who's open-minded. They're going to look into something to make sure that it makes sense or doesn't, and what's the supporting evidence for it. But the debunkers, they're just out to try and destroy any argument for that. They don't want to listen to it. They won't consider it at all. So there's a chapter on that. I also have a chapter on religion and history. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't believe in air, because you can't see air, right? Yeah. I liked that analogy. I thought that was good.
Yeah, I actually went to a seminar for promotion and writing, and they gave us guidance to say, okay, we want you to write a blurb, and that's the one I wrote, and I used it in this book. But let me see if I can find that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, because it's true. I have a friend who's a staunch skeptic, and he really goes after us when we, have the evidence, and they're like, well, what did you use, and did you put this out there, and did you do this, and did you do that, and blah blah blah. But it was like, it's just so trying too hard to be a skeptic sometimes. I mean,
you could have done everything that he said, and he would still not believe you.
Right. You know what I mean? So even if you did use a level and blah, blah, blah. Did you find it?
Trust me, my dad dealt with those kinds of folks all the time. Oh, right. And he would just get worn out and say, look, at a certain point, I'm not going to waste my time on someone who's just not going to believe no matter what.
No matter what.
And then my phone rang that time, just so you know.
Yeah, that I heard. That's ringing. That's not the tinging that we heard before. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was here. I'm in the wrong spot.
I know, and I have a PDF. I could probably it's long closer to the beginning of the book.
But so I have the chapter on skepticism. I have a chapter on how you see the world. Kind of like we get into these program ways of viewing things and make a lot of assumptions and stop asking questions and stop wondering. So there's a chapter that's really about that. And those two chapters kind of go hand in hand. I have a chapter on religion, history, and these types of phenomena, because there's a lot of folks with religious hangups. Yep. So I really dive into that, and I explore it from the Eastern religion tradition, a little bit of Islam, a little bit of Judaism, and a lot on Christianity, because the country we live in is predominantly a Christian based country. But I think the thing I try to do there is diffuse the fear factor and talk about, well, wait a minute, a lot of folks that are either fundamentalists or traditionally religious, they actually don't even know the Bible that well. They just know what they've been told by somebody else or what they assume. Yep. And they're leaning on these Old Testament verses that are diminishing the value of these, whereas in the New Testament, all these kinds of phenomena are on display all the time. And so really, I wrap up that chapter saying, Jesus says that a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. And these mediums that help grieving people are bearing good fruit, in my view.
I think.
And I think, it's
started listening. It just
exploring into that
stuff.
That area. I just wanted to remove a lot of the fear and apprehension a lot of folks may have if they're brought up in that kind of faith. Like, hey, it's okay to look and explore these kinds of phenomena, and they can be helpful. I'm not saying to become dependent on it or that you should go see a medium every week or anything like that. It should just be viewed as a part of a healing process. You still need support from loved ones. You need support from people who have been through the same thing and friendship with them. You need to learn to be of service to other folks, because that'll heal you too. You need to let go of anger and hatred and let go of feelings of guilt tied to, I should have done this or I should have done that.
Right.
You put all that together and it can help a person. So just like anything else in life, I think it's about balance and having a balanced life and not just getting too wrapped up into one thing so you're off track. And I have a chapter, this one's pretty interesting, on an experiment I conducted with my sister before her passing. So she had developed a type of cancer. We knew she was terminal. And I just asked her, I said, would you want to try and do an experiment that could be helpful to other people if it's successful? So she said, sure. And what I really started with was going back to the whole idea of the whole Houdini code. And I don't know, are you familiar with that?
No.
So you know who Harry Houdini was?
Yeah.
A famous magician, about 100 years ago or thereabouts. He initially was very interested in spiritualism and the idea of a potential afterlife and all this. But I guess he somehow got burned, or he was dissatisfied with something, and he kind of became a debunker and tried to claim fraud for a lot of the mediums of the day. And in fact, later it was even shown that, he had an assistant who said she actually set somebody up to look bad so Houdini would look good or whatever. But lo and behold, at the end of his life, Houdini made an agreement with his wife that, if by some chance I can come back and communicate with you, if there is life after death, I'm going to give you a secret code. And he did.
Yep.
And so after that happened, there was a medium named Arthur Ford who actually did give the secret code to his wife, Beatrice. And the code was Beatrice Believe. At least that's my recollection of what it was.
Something. Yeah, I remember. I do remember.
So this made the newspapers. It was a big headline, Houdini code solved and all this. Well, then the debunkers started coming out of the woodwork. When, those two were in cahoots. They did this for publicity, blah, blah, blah. So if you look it up today, it'll say it's never been solved, but it actually was solved.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, okay, if I'm going to do an experiment with my sister, how can I defeat that or eliminate that kind of concern? I thought, well, what was it about this that caused these folks to get set up? And what I concluded was, well, the problem was that any living person knew what the code was. because then you have to trust that person. So someone could always say they spilled the beans. So what I suggested to my sister was write something, a word or words on a piece of paper, put it in a sealed envelope, and then just initial the outside, and it will not be opened until after you've passed, and we have a number of meetings that we've talked to see if they can get the secret code. So that was the difference between the Houdini experiment and this one. And I'm sorry, but I won't tell you the conclusion because no one will want to read it.
Yeah.
Something similar happened.
How would you know if you haven't opened it? If you're going to, No,
it has been concluded. The chapter in that goes through the whole process from how it was devised, my sister's progression, and then how we went out about the experiment, and then the results at the end. So we give you the whole thing in that chapter.
Oh, cool.
Something similar happened with my mom. My brother passed away, and him and her had the same thing. Like, you'll know that it's real because it'll be this. And off the wall code, I didn't know that they had come up with it. I had joined a Facebook group, and it was supposed to be for practicing mediums, people practicing. And this one group, I posted the picture, nobody got it right at all, like not even close. And this one person messaged me, which she wasn't supposed to do, but she did. And she's like, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but she nailed him, and she didn't sugarcoat it. So I gave my mom the information. My mom contacted her, they met up, and as close as she could get to what the code was, she got it.
Good.
And Good. It was perfect validation for her. And again, I didn't know about it. And she contacted me. She didn't ask me for money. She didn't, it wasn't one of those like, hey, give me $150 and I'll do a reading for you. She just said, this is what I'm getting from this picture. And she was right on. So
it's the gold standard, really, of mediumship messages, other than the cross correspondence experiments, which I talk about those in the book too, that were recorded by the Society of Psychical Research many years ago. And what those were about, that's considered the ultimate gold standard of evidence for survival of consciousness proven through mediumship. And what they had was basically a number of different mediums from around the world. After one of the members of the SPR passed, they were getting these fragmented messages that didn't mean anything independently, but then when they were all pulled together and given to someone at the Society of Psychical Research, the whole thing was like a mosaic and fit together. So they got a message out of this, all the fragments. Awesome. And it demonstrated a conscious intelligence directing that process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a piece together a movie. Mm-hmm. That's really cool. This whole thing is like, you never stop learning in this field ever. Every time you think you understand like all these different aspects, and what more could there possibly be? Then all of a sudden there's like another 50 things. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God. And you just never know who taps into what. Again,
even like near-death experiences, people want to just say, oh, here's exactly what happens and here's what it means and all that. But it's tough to do. I think what I look at is the metadata around that and what are the most common experiences people have and what's the most common feeling. Number one, most commonly people have a feeling of immense joy and peacefulness through the process. There are some that have had what is called a hellish experience or a negative experience, but it's pretty rare by comparison. And usually what they find is that those folks had some sort of inner guilt or feelings of shame or whatever, or like they were deserving of punishment that may well have led their own psyche to drive it in that direction. Now, that's just my observation or my guess, but most, the vast majority are very peaceful. When you talk about judgment, what they find is, they have the life review. Not all of them do, but a good percentage have a life review. And it's where they instantaneously experience all the events of their life, whether they helped or hurt someone, but from the perspective of the other person. And they are judged, but they're judged by themselves. Mm-hmm. So what could be worse than that?
Right.
So, but so you're responsible for yourself. It's called accountability, right?
Yes, I had a close call. I accidentally overdosed on pain pills. I had a broken collarbone, and I took too many pain pills. And then I tried to take a shower, and the water got cold, and I was shaking, and I took more pain pills. And then I just went and lay down on the couch, and then I was actually dying. And I was floating down my mother's hallway, and at the house I grew up in. And it's like the hallway was really, really long. And then it's like I'm moving, but my feet aren't moving like this. They were just floating, and I would just go in increments forward and increments forward. And then it's like the closer I got to her door, and I had not a clue what was going on, not a clue. And as I got closer to the door, I'm seeing the other doors going by, and I'm just like, I felt comfortable because I'm home. You know what I mean? Like, I'm home. And then I'm like, wait a minute, why am I home? And then I'm thinking I have to get to the door, and I'm thinking my mother is behind the door and I have to wake her up. And that's what I kept thinking. I'm like, oh my God, I got to get to my mother. I'm trying to talk, nothing, right? And then I get closer, and now all of a sudden things are floating by me. And they're things from my childhood that were in my bedroom, like my candlesticks were going by me. Things that I had in my bedroom. And I'm just looking at them like, what? You know what I mean? Like, what is going on? And I'd try to grab it, and I couldn't. It would like disappear. And then I'd jump forward, and then I could actually grab it. And then I'm holding on. I'm taking the thing. I'm trying to throw it at the door. I'm like, because I still can't speak. I'm trying to wake my mother up, right? I'm trying to throw it at the door, and it's just like disintegrating before it gets to the door. Now I'm getting pissed. Right? I'm like, what is going on? And then I moved forward again, and then it was just like things started feeling different and seeming different, and I was just like, realized I am dying. And then I'm like, oh no. I'm like, I don't want to die. I didn't want to go through that door then. Then I was like, I don't want to die. And I tried to say it, and nothing was coming out. And then I screamed it, I don't want to die. And it came out. And then I was like, because I was laying on the couch, and I was just in a towel because, like I said, the water got cold, and I was just in a towel. But I slammed back into my body on the couch, boom, and it woke me up like that, and I was drenched in sweat. But since then, that's when I hear these tones. Like if a spirit comes in the room, like I hear 3 different distinct tones: a low, medium, and a high. If it's a low tone, I'm nervous. Like that's something not so good. The mediums and the highs are okay, and mostly it is that, very rarely it's the low, but I take that low one and I use that to my advantage. Like when we take people on ghost hunts, that have never been on a ghost hunt, and if I hear that low tone, I'll be like, well, let's go over this way. You know what I mean? We won't go that way. You know what I mean? So it's a helpful thing, but it's
Do
not.
you feel like the lower tones, you're connecting with a lower level entity, and the higher tones is somebody higher, more advanced, more evolved?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So it's like, and if it gets too close, it's deafening. It's like ear piercing, like, oh my God, back off, because I just can't.
It's actually pretty common for people who've had a near-death experience to have expanded capabilities afterwards. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
So what you described there makes total sense.
Yeah, so it's crazy. It's crazy. And then I didn't go through that door. And then we've had people on the show that have gone through those doors, and they, the different, like Michelle Claire, like.
Yeah, she's a good friend.
Yeah, how she describes the colors and everything that's there. That's amazing to me, So like a lot of different people see different things, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's in how you evolve, like how high you are when you get there as to what you're seeing. You know what I mean? I don't know if we'll ever know until when we get there.
Yeah, maybe not. If I had to just guess, I'd say I think that who we are as people has a lot to do with it, our experiences, and maybe where we are. Like a lot of these are recorded for people in cardiac arrest, and they're maybe further along in the dying process or much closer to that threshold. And I think, like some people they'll see like a being of light or Christ or Buddha or something, but it seems like I think I heard one explanation that was kind of interesting, where they were told, like, I'm appearing to you in a way that would make you comfortable, based on what you expect, so there's one source, I think, but that can have many faces. Maybe depending on, and agents of that source, that are there to help or whatever, whether they're angels or whatever you want to call them, or advanced spirits or whatnot. But I think, a lot of the mediums will talk about spirit guides, or we have these guides through our lives that help us and stay on course and push us or nudge us, whether we know it or not, so that we can fulfill what we're here to do. And maybe those are some of the folks that are there for us when we cross over, along with our loved ones that have passed.
Yeah. You mentioned something about a hummingbird in your somewhere. I was skimming. I read a thing about a hummingbird. Now this is going to be
it sounds so cliche, but I'll be happy to share that story if you'd like.
I definitely want to, because it's going to be relevant to Mary Jane. We're talking about last week.
So this is shortly after our son Brandon passed. It's within the first year, probably even less than that. I don't remember exactly, but probably within the first 6 to 9 months. And we had a good friend, Joe Colucci, who we didn't even know until Brandon had passed, but we knew his son, Michael Colucci, was buddies with Brandon. And then the Colucci family reached out to us afterwards, and then they became close. So Joe started seeing a woman who's both a therapist and a medium, named Melinda Vale. She's a high caliber person in the Phoenix area. I think the world of her. But so he's in there because I think he's trying to get counseling for his boys or whatever, and stuff they were going through. So Melinda's acting as a therapist at the time, but then all of a sudden she's like, well, Brandon just spun in and out of here, and he'd like you to tell his mother hummingbirds and butterflies. So Joe's like, what? And she says, I don't know what it means, but he says, tell Brandon's mom hummingbirds and butterflies. So Joe then calls Susie, my wife, and says, okay, this is going to sound weird, but Melinda Vale said that Brandon touched in and he wants you to hear or to pass along hummingbirds and butterflies. And she had just noted, oh my gosh, this whole week I've been going on my walks and there's just butterflies everywhere. I've really noticed all these butterflies. And I've had a bunch of hummingbirds in the backyard. And I was actually recently watering a plant, and one came up and was drinking right out of the hose I was holding. And then the most remarkable thing was, while she's on the phone with Joe, there's a hummingbird that comes to the glass door, is actually banging on the glass door while she's on the phone. That had never happened before, and it's never happened since.
That's amazing. It is amazing. But when I saw hummingbird, I was just quickly skimming, just like I just need to have something, you know what I mean? And I'm like skim, and I saw the hummingbird, and I was like, oh, because we were asking, like the fox is my most prevalent right now animal spirit guide. I have spirit guide, people spirit guides too, but fox, and you see down there fox, and you're in the fox den, right? But the fox is a butterfly, Mama D is a butterfly, and we were saying to Mary Jane, well, what is your spirit guide, And then she kept thinking like, well, the hummingbird is this and that, but she wasn't sure if that was it. And then I have been seeing since last week so many different references to hummingbird. And then when I read that today, I was just like, oh my God. So maybe it is. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. The signs, when the signs are out there, you got to kind of,
Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot of dragonfly, butterfly, hummingbird kind of things. But that one, I'm hard to convince sometimes. But, having that bird bang on the door while she's on the phone here, pretty strong.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I love the love taps, Like I one time I was just like, I was so upset with everything under the sun. And I said, someone said to me something about pray on it. And I'm like, if God existed, then he would shut my mind up. I don't believe, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like acting like a 2-year-old, honestly. And then I sat down on the couch, and as I'm sitting and my eyes are wide open, and it was just like an iron gate went down. My eyes are open. There's nothing. Blank, silence, nothing, black. And then all of a sudden I slowly got my vision back, and it's like, oh, okay, now I'm crazy. They're like, no, because you said if God existed, he would shut your mind up. And he did. And he gave you a thump, And I was like, okay. So then, that was like the very beginning of my actual real believing in spiritual things, like, okay.
Yeah, it takes a certain amount to nudge us. It's our own thing that we need, I guess, to get us there, huh?
Exactly, 100%. But then it's it's up to you to cultivate, or you have to accept. That's a gift, really. That you're given something like that. So don't take it for granted.
No, not at all.
Yeah, like you have a great gift, and I think that you're sharing a lot with a lot of people. Like you have a lot to offer, and especially helping bereaved parents and even spouses. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Spouse, but parents.
Well, and it's not just me. I mean, I have to give credit to Elizabeth Boyson, who's the president, and then Irene Vuvalidis, she's the vice president. They run the day-to-day operation. I'm the chairman of the board, so I'm more involved in the overall vision and things like that. And then they have a provider list of therapists and also mediums, but they use my certification process to vet the mediums that they put on the list.
That is awesome.
So those are kind of my roles. But I love the conference we had, and I look forward. We're going to have another one in August 2024, and anticipate another sold out event with 900 people or so. And we've got really some of the top people from around the world that are going to be there to talk. Dr. Mary Neal, who is a near-death experiencer, will be there. We will also, we're going to have Anita Morjani, who's another near-death experiencer. We're going to have Gordon Smith, who I think is possibly the best medium in the world. He's out of Scotland. He's definitely in the top tier. We'll have Suzanne Kiesman, Suzanne Wilson. We've got James Van Prague. So we got a big lineup,
You're lucky to get him. He doesn't do anything.
Yeah. We got him because Gordon Smith I think nudged him to get involved. And Gordon, as soon as he found out about us, he was all in. He's been doing fundraisers for us with his art and other things. And yeah, he's a really good man, and he's a phenomenal medium. So people have really lined up to support the organization. And when I was there last time, it just felt so rewarding. The people in that hotel said they were deathly afraid of that many bereaved parents being there at one time. They thought it would be such a downer, but they couldn't believe how upbeat everything was and how much love was in the air and the atmosphere. And when I was walking around, I'd say half a dozen people came up to me and told me, I want to thank you. You saved my life. Now, whether that was somewhere because of the book and somewhere because of the organization, but
does that matter?
What it told me is that doing something worthwhile here, doing something worthwhile, and it's necessary and needed. So
that's amazing.
So much so, so yeah, keep up the great work. Are you going to be doing more books, or do you have something?
Yeah. So this book is just coming out. The Persistence of the Soul is coming out. My publisher said October 3rd, but I looked on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and it says October 10th. But I'm working on another one to follow. I've got a ways to go, but it's going to be about what it was like for me growing up with the father that I had.
Oh, that would be very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. But I'm going to scroll the site because I want to see these. I want to see the songs. I want to see the videos. I want to see all the different clips.
All that's there. So enjoy.
Fabulous. Mark, we are at the end of our 2 hours. See, the time flies, right? Thank you so much for, coming on even at last minute. And I promise you, I will read your book. And I'll be stalking. I'll be looking.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me on. It was good to meet you both. And I wish
nice to meet you, Mark.
Wish you the very best and have a great evening.
Oh, thank you. Mary Jane, thank you for sitting in for Mama D. And
of course.
hang for a minute, guys. I'm going to play our exit video, and everybody else, we'll see y'all next week. Thank you so much. Please share the show. Mark has a lot of great information to put out there, so I wanted to get to as many people as possible. And thank you, and buonanotte, and vi amo.
We thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Fox Den with Gina B and Mama D. We are here every Thursday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, bringing you a variety of guests. Streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, as well as our Anchor audio venues. We hope you enjoyed our show and our guest, and we would love it if you would go to our YouTube channel, The Fox Den with Gina B and Mama D, subscribe, and definitely hit that notification button to never miss a show. We'll see you all next week, and subscribers, watch for our pop-up shows as well.